Welcome inside another episode of Point to the Passer. Today we've got a combination of basketball and baseball for you, starting with some transfer and roster updates on the basketball side, and then an interview with Carolina broadcaster Matt Krause that you do not want to miss as he offers some really good insight into this weekend's Super Regionals versus Arizona. Jonathan, good to be with you again. It's been a minute. Lots has happened. Roster updates for sure. And the Diamond Heels, man. How about it? I know you're loving every minute. You're tweeting up a storm over on Bosch Brothers. It's a good time to be a Carolina baseball fan, I'd say.
It's a really good time to be a Carolina baseball fan. How can you not be romantic about baseball, to quote the movie Moneyball, right? And how can you not be romantic about this Carolina baseball team and their chances in the postseason here? It just feels like there's something special about this group. So if you haven't tuned in yet, definitely do so this weekend for the Supers. It's going to be an exciting series between Carolina and Arizona that we're going to talk more about when we talk with Matt Krause. But they're just fun to watch. And the personalities are fun. The storylines are a lot of fun too. And this team is really, really good. And they have a chance to do something pretty special and potentially something that's never been done at UNC, which would be winning the whole thing. As many times as Carolina's been to the College World Series and even to the finals a couple of times, as recently as Oregon State back in 2006 and 2007, and visitors in Omaha a lot, but have not won the whole thing. So it's going to be exciting to see the journey for this team and the next step. We stay in the moment with that Arizona series coming up starting Friday.
Yeah, like we said at the top of the show, stick around for that interview with Matt because we're going to ask him about all those things about matchups and why the College World Series is so difficult to win. It is one of the toughest in all of college athletics and pro sports, honestly. There's a lot of complications to it that make it challenging, and baseball is just a weird sport at times. But maybe one of the reasons we'll start with basketball, a little simpler and something we know like the back of our hand, we say. So, what we'll do here is just provide you guys with a quick roster update. There have been some moves, including an international transfer from Montenegro. Do you feel like this is the piece that we really needed? And let's just get a quick roster update from you. I know there's some questions at point guard, and now we have a good amount of shooting and guard play. I watched some of his highlight reels, but how does he fit into this lineup?
So Carolina really needed another shooter on the perimeter next to you're going to be starting Kyan Evans, who that's a elite shooter, and you hope that he can bring what he did at Colorado State in terms of his ability to just knock down from three off the catch and off the dribble. Then Seth Trimble, as we know, just last season, his first season starting, his ability to slash, to get to the rim, that's really where he excels, especially in transition, drawing contact, getting to the free throw line. But the three-point shooting continues to be a concern and something that he's going to have to really work on. So you wanted another shooter around him in the starting lineup, and Luka is that player. He's really more of a guard, I'd say a combo point guard and shooting guard at 6'5", less than he's more of that than a wing, a true small forward. So in the lineup, Carolina needs a small forward to start, or at least compete with Jonathan Powell for that starting spot at the three. And Luka probably slots in at the three, but he's more of a guard. What I like about it though is he gives you that shooting. He gives you somebody that can create off the dribble in a way that I don't want to confuse him with RJ Davis because he's not. They're two different players, but in terms of just the style of being able to shoot in transition, being able to go off the dribble pull-ups, coming off screens, off the catch as well. He's like Kyan Evans. He's really, really good off the dribble and off the catch. So he gives you another perimeter threat and somebody that he's also had the ball in his hands at the end of games. And he's somebody that's played professional basketball now for the last 4 years in a high-level league in Montenegro. That's the Adriatic Basketball Association. It's a league that produces college players like Tomislav Ivisic, who's at Illinois. And there's been some big names that have either come to college now or names that we recognize. Somebody like Marcus Page played in the ABA. And he averaged, I think it was like 8 or 9 points a game while he was out there. Luka's coming off a season where he averaged close to 15. And he's one of the top 5 scorers in this league. This guy is a guy who's a pro who's just happening to play college basketball now.
Love that.
It's really a unique sort of time in college basketball with being able to bring in international players. And this will be the first time that Carolina's brought in a international pro. So you're getting somebody who's been playing guys who not only have already played college basketball, but that have been playing pro basketball for a while. There's a clip of him on Twitter from Sean Moran of him taking Rashid Suleiman, if you remember that name, off the dribble. This
Hmm.
was back in December. So you're talking about some of these guys who he's already taken on and won against Duke players, whether it's from 10 years ago, right? Right, or not. Now he's going to be doing it with the current college players. So somebody that's unique in that sense that he's a pro, he's experienced, and he's somebody that should make an impact right away and slot into that starting lineup.
Yeah, like you mentioned, we're going to need the shooting. We're going to need the impact player. And, this team in my mind, really coming together. And I feel really good about our front court and our back court now all around. I feel like we have a decent amount of depth as well. It'll just be time to see what Hubert can do with those pieces. And we've talked about this. This is a big year for him. A lot of people see it as a make or break year. We don't really have I would say, a traditional point guard. You don't have your RJ Davis. You don't have your Marcus Page, Kobe White, guys like that from over the years. But we do feel pretty spread out, and we're a lot bigger than last year too, which I think is not to be understated. I think that's just so incredibly important to a Carolina team. Rebounding, especially on the offensive end, will not lack this year, ideally.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the roster construction is a lot more traditional in the sense of you have the size that you want, the some of the physicality too up front, and then you have size throughout the lineup now. I guess the one thing with Luca, the question that will be figured out as the season goes is since he really is more of a one or a two guard, how does that fit with Trimble and Kai and Evans, and how does Hubert manage the roster? I think that's something we'll dive into as the summer goes on.
Mhm.
But I do like, in addition to him being a really strong perimeter shooter, uh, this last season for SC Derby in the ABA, he was at 39.9% from three, 45% from the field, 87% from the free throw line. So
Mhm.
this guy can really shoot it. In addition to that, like I mentioned, the scoring 14.9 points, top five in that league, which is a good league out there. And so, anyway, all that to say that he gives you shooting, he gives you scoring, he gives you somebody that can score off the bounce, which we needed, and just can make a play when the clock is winding down. And then he also can flex to the point guard position. So for me, what I like about that is he gives you versatility too. Let's say that Derek Dixon or Jaden Young are not ready as the backup point guard. You can put Luca, flex him over to that position, and then you can put the ball in his hands. So it gives Hubert Davis a lot more options. But this is a true impact player, a true guy that moves the needle that they really needed once Drake Powell decided he was going to stay in the draft, and once Stojakovic goes to Illinois. You really had to get an impact player. It was kind of getting late in the cycle, but they were able to make it happen. So I really can't understate how important it is. Um, it really just finalizes the roster in a way that, okay, they have what they need at this point. We can talk about floor and ceiling for this team, as we go, but it's a really big pickup for all of those reasons.
This feels a little bit like a Jim Tanner special. I can't know the ins and outs, but I'm not sure this happens. International experienced good shooter like this without him on board as GM, right?
I think you're right. I think you're right. And part of the reason why it seems that way is it seems like they've been very intentional this year with him on board in terms of how they have pivoted, especially, right? Because one of the things about the portal that we found is it's unpredictable. And no matter who you are, if you're a blue blood like Carolina or Kansas, or Kentucky, Duke even. It doesn't matter. You have to be able to pivot quickly when your first option doesn't work out. And they've been able to do that a lot better. They've been able to tap into all of the different ways and areas where you get talent now. And this international pool is one of those areas that they had not been able to land somebody yet. I know we talked, this was last summer, we talked about the big guys that they were going after, whether it was Julius Halafanua or Samit Yitaglu, who ends up at SMU. Julius ends up at Georgetown. They were in conversations with those guys and kind of went deeper in the process with some than others, but regardless, they didn't land somebody, and now you have. Um, so I think you're right. I think with Tanner's international connections, and you look at Buzz Peterson too. Both of those guys have connections in international basketball, so they're able to identify these guys that we're looking at. Luka being one. Ivan Karchenko is one of the other guys who was a target who just committed in the last day or so to Arizona. Um, but I think Luka is better for right now for what they needed. So it's a testament to Tanner and his team and to Hubert too in terms of how they were able to make this happen. I think the last thing I want to say about that part is the fact that now looking ahead and looking forward, now that you've landed somebody, you have the potential to create a pipeline. Maybe not to the extent of Illinois and Brad Underwood, and they have their entire team feels like is from Europe right now, international players. But it gives you another option in the pipeline, and so there's potential as long as the NCAA allows pro players from Europe to come over. There's a potential for Carolina to keep tapping into that area of talent, and yeah, so it's exciting for the present with Luca and his impact this year, but it's also exciting for the future in terms of some of the guys that Carolina could bring in going forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be kind of a unique experiment for Carolina, something they have not really dove into before. So excited to see what happens. And then the second transfer we've got recently is Jaden Young, more local than Montenegro. He's from Goldsboro, North Carolina, a VT transfer. The Sandman he come. Can we say that? Can we cue that song up for him? What do you expect from Jaden with his skill set and what he brings to Carolina?
You had me thinking about Metallica there for a minute and the
Oh, the
concert
concert.
that,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they finally had
Legendary.
Metallica come to Blacksburg, which is
Pretty
pretty
cool.
cool. And that has been their song there forever at Lane Stadium, and the whole stadium shakes. Um, I think Jaden, focusing on him, it was one of those things where I think things just lined up where it worked out and made sense for him coming in as a depth piece. He had a sophomore season where he put up a lot of attempts. He was I think one of their top scorers. If I have pull up the numbers here in terms of his points, but the thing on him in his sophomore season at Virginia Tech, was that he was very inefficient. So you look at his shooting numbers, they're not going to look very good, especially from three, under 30% at 29.6 from three. Overall shooting numbers, 34.7% from the field. Some of that is he's taken a lot of tough shots and he was putting up a high volume of shots. He was almost at five threes a game and over eight attempts from the field per game. Average 8.1 points, but had some big games in terms of the point totals, especially down the stretch. Like, this is a guy who had some 20-point games, but it's important context, I think, to look at the fact that he was also putting up like 20 attempts in some of those games too. Um, One example, this was Syracuse at the beginning of March. Game goes to overtime. He had 20 attempts from the field. It was actually a pretty decent efficiency game for him, that one, 10 for 20, 26 points. Um, but his last game of the year against Cal in the ACC tournament, this was also an overtime game, double overtime. He was 5 for 19 for 12 points. I bring up some of those specific numbers just because it's hard to know in terms of like him in the scoring and what he might bring. Now, it's possible that could he be a guy that comes off the bench and is a little bit of a microwave score for you and hits a couple of shots and that's the role? I think maybe. In terms of some of the things that he did the best last year at Virginia Tech, he was over 50% and 56% at the rim, which is something I think that Carolina really needs, is a ball handler who can get to the rim and finish at the rim. That was only 18% of his attempts. So this is somebody that I think if I'm looking at it strategy wise, I would want to get him to the rim more often and maybe not have as many of the perimeter attempts from three. Um, so I went right into the like, how is he going to be of an impact to Carolina? Where does he slot in? Um, I think for me, I'd have him behind, at least initially, Derek Dixon as a possible backup point guard, but he could really play both guard positions. So I think he's somebody in the rotation, but my hope would be that Dixon could be ahead of him off the bench, and we'll see about Isaiah Dennis too, who's another guy as a freshman who's coming in that has potential as a shooter, especially from the perimeter, and is really athletic in transition. So I like it as a depth piece. He's like you said, he's from Goldsboro. He was at Virginia Tech. He transferred initially to High Point, and then the High Point coach ends up leaving, And it's from all accounts, it sounds like he reached out to Carolina and said, "Look, if there's a spot, I want to come," and has said publicly that he grew up a Tar Heel fan, how much Carolina basketball means to him and his family. And here's the part that you love about it, that you're going to love about it, Greg, that we've talked about a little bit already, is the fact that he's a dog. He's got that mentality. He's got an edge, and he also just is going to be somebody who wants to show up for Carolina basketball, knows what it means in terms of his history and the standing of where he wants Carolina basketball to be as one of the top programs consistently in the country. So he's somebody that, regardless of what the role ends up being, he's going to fight in practice. He's going to be very competitive. And I think he can help in terms of the rotation and add some depth in those guard spots that have now been shored up by adding Luka as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all that insight. There's been a lot of moves this offseason. It took a little time to kind of get into it, but then it started happening. There's always enough time for coaches to figure this out. It seems like when you're in the middle of the portal season and it feels like you're missing on guys, and then you see someone get picked up, you see Florida take two top point guards that we both had our eye on. Yeah, that's gonna sting a little bit, but I think Jim Tanner's got a vision in mind and hopefully working very closely with Hubert. And now that Hubert has this roster, hopefully he has the pieces that he needs. It's just a matter of figuring out where the issue has been in the past, right? Has it been the roster construction? Has it been the in-game coaching? Has it been the lack of adjustments? Where is the issue and what can Hubert do with this team?
Yeah, those are great questions. I do think it's not the only thing, but the roster construction last year was a real issue that never was able to be sorted out. And I
And
think you've fixed a lot of that this year.
yeah, you and I talked on the pod last summer, and despite being optimistic, we even knew then that we had missed on the roster construction piece in terms of getting a true big with Clifford the Big Red Dog going to Alabama and to Nate Oates and that whole situation. So, despite being optimistic, we were very aware of what the season was about to hold. And so, going in, we deep down kind of knew, yes, there's some roster construction issues, but this feels like it could be different, and we'll be able to identify where the issues might be if there are any.
I think so. I think that you've covered your bases in terms of having the positional size that you need overall. You have somebody that in Jonathan Powell who's a true three type of small forward, long, athletic. Again, we thought about Lucas, maybe not a true three, but certainly the front court. You have now a 7 footer that you were looking for, a guy who not only is 7 feet but can step out and shoot it.
That's all I wanted in that
That's
clip of him the other day, just draining four back-to-back threes. Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess where I'm going with it is the positional size is there now. It was not there last year, and it was a problem consistently. And then you also just didn't have guys production wise who could be consistent. Um, and so there was so much just going in and out of the lineup in terms of trying to settle on a lineup. And Hubert
Hmm.
didn't, as we know, didn't really get there until like February, which is not
Right.
where you want to be. Uh, with this team, the roster construction I think is good, but you have guys that have a lot of potential in most cases that haven't necessarily proven it at this level
Hmm.
or proven it as full time and being the starting player, star player at that position, like a Henry Vasar who's been coming off the bench. Um, so I think that's where the question is do these guys reach more of their ceiling in that 1 year and come together and do it? Or is it more of the floor? And so there is some, I think, well, I wouldn't say I think there's a good amount of variability in terms of what this can look like. So a lot of it is coaching, a lot of it is the team coming together, how they fit together. So that's going to be the conversation, I think, going through the summer. As soon as we see these guys starting to scrimmage in later here in June when the basketball camps start, and then as the fall summer turns to fall, we'll start to get to see some of the exhibitions and um, see them as the season is around the corner. So I'm rambling. We can restart.
That's all we do here is ramble on points of the passer, and we have a few loyal ramble listeners. Thank you for being out there. No, I think that pretty much wraps it up on basketball, and we can pivot on over to the baseball talk, which is the talk of the town, honestly. And we've got a really special guest to help us do so. And now we want to welcome in Carolina women's basketball radio play-by-play broadcaster Matt Krause, who also does play-by-play, color analysis, and live game producing for the ACC network. If you're a Heels fan, you surely recognize his name. He's dedicated time and energy to so many Carolina athletic programs over the year, and right now that focus is Carolina baseball as they look to make it back to the College World Series with two more wins this weekend. Matt, thanks for taking the time today in the midst of it all to talk about these Diamond Heels.
Guys, thanks so much for having me on. Looking forward to chatting here.
Absolutely. Your journey to Carolina, in a way, started way back in third grade, if I'm right. You loved sports from a young age and could apparently retain stats like no other. I'd say you're similar to my co-host in that way, Jonathan. He's kind of an encyclopedia, rattling off stats about the ACC, the SEC. It does not matter. What's your journey been like to get to this point, and what are some of your favorite parts about this job?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like you said, this has been a lifelong passion. I learned very quickly that I had limited to no athletic talent and yet enjoyed sports and enjoyed knowing the names and the numbers around everything. And when I realized that could be a career, it became kind of a life dedication to figure it out. When it came time to pick a college choice, I went to Elon for the opportunity to get on the air as an undergraduate student. I was the lead radio voice of their women's basketball program. I got to call baseball games as well, some solo, some with the voice of the Phoenix, Taylor Durham, who is the son of the late Woody Durham. So I don't pretend to have a lifelong background with Carolina. There was obviously an appreciation and a following from afar for how successful Tar Heel athletic programs were. But my connection that got me into Carolina was through Taylor and through Charlotte Smith, who obviously hit the game-winning shot to win the 1994 Women's Basketball National Championship. She's been the head coach over at Elon for women's basketball for the last decade plus now, and so. In 2018, one day sent a blind critique email to Jones and addressed it, Dear Mr. Angel. And I had no idea that there was going to be an opening for the women's basketball job that summer. I was fortunate enough to be hired to do that. And then I arrived on campus fall of 2018, which is about 9 months or so before the launch of the linear ACC network. And so things were undergoing a modernization, if you will, on the television side as that infrastructure was being built up. And I was fortunate enough to be here at the time in which that was building out. And I was able to get on the air there. And it's just kind of built and evolved through the years. I added game producing to my repertoire in 2021, 2022, added Jones's statistician for football. So there's a whole lot of different things that I do.
And you get to call him Jones now and not just Mr. Angel, right? He
There
calls
you
you
go.
Mr. Krause.
Exactly.
That's how it works.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and Matt and I were just talking previously that I actually worked at Elon as well, and we overlapped there. So our journeys kind of, parallel each other in a way in terms of some of that. But I worked at UNC as well in 2019, and so I remember those studios being built. It's really crazy how quickly those went up, the state-of-the-art technology, that infrastructure for the ACC network. What's it like working with all those folks over there and, having that in your back pocket to manage all these operations? Carolina has so many athletics and everything going on at once. How do you manage it all?
There are some immensely talented people that work behind the scenes in ACC network operations. The fan base is familiar with myself and some of the other broadcasters who you see in front facing roles, but there are countless people that sacrifice so much time and energy to ensure that those games get on the air because Carolina has 28 sports. And of that, 13 sports that are events that we produce through ACC network broadcasts, team sports, if you will. Carolina lines up and plays Team B across a various sport. And frequently that means overlaps. Frequently that means 3 to 4 games a day. It is certainly a difficult task to produce that at a high level, but we're fortunate because the relationship that we've forged with ESPN as part of ACC Network, it's been very fruitful and lucky to be a part of that for sure.
That's great insight kind of behind the scenes, Matt, in terms of all that you're involved in, but certainly all that goes into managing such a high level, high scale operation at this level for Carolina athletics and media coverage. And I'm curious if we can zero in a little bit now on baseball specifically, since you've done a lot on radio, you've done a lot with producing, but also on TV with the baseball team this year. Uh, And you were there for the regional in the production chair, I think, right? And as Carolina took down the Sooners over the weekend, what were your biggest takeaways from the regional as a whole? And specifically, what did you see from Carolina this weekend in their ability to win the Chapel Hill Regional?
I think a couple of things. Number one is it reinforced what we thought about this team coming out of the regular season, coming out of the ACC tournament, and going into the postseason. It's an opportunistic lineup that has some power offensively at times. Obviously, Sam Angelo's power surge was something that not a lot of folks, I think, saw coming. Though, if you talk to Scott Forbes before the regional, he felt good about Angelo in those matchups. So clearly those coaches, they know what they're doing when they put together the lineup, especially that DH spot, which is kind of been the one revolving door all season long. The rest of the 8 guys there in the lineup are pretty set, especially since the middle of the year. But an opportunistic lineup that is going to make opponents pay when they make mistakes, whether it's walks or errors. I think we saw that a couple of times. There were those 2 moments in first innings against Oklahoma, Saturday night and Monday afternoon, where the Sooners make an error in the field on a relatively routine ground ball, and Carolina puts a crooked number on the board. And you just wonder how differently those games would have gone if either the Tar Heels didn't capitalize on the error on the third baseman on Saturday or the error on, I believe it was the shortstop and a throwing error in the first inning on Monday. You wonder what those games would have been like if Oklahoma was able to score first, even with those mistakes. But Carolina is able to capitalize on that. And then pitching wise, it's the fact that the Tar Heels have 2 bona fide aces. Jake Knapp was supposed to be the Friday guy going into last year, got hurt, and has come back and quite literally has not been beaten this year. He has a perfect record. The team is undefeated in games in which he has pitched. Jason DeCaro was kind of the phenom last year and went through some bumps earlier this year. I think the peak point of his bumpiness was probably the Duke start early in the month of April, where Duke got to him, last only 3 innings. Blue Devils won the game, set up the rubber match the next day, which was that 14-inning walk-off win for Carolina to take the series. But ever since then, DeCaro has really settled into his role and is pitching very, very well. He had an okay outing against Florida State in the ACC semifinals, but bounced back from that well. So all that to say that, these 2 guys give Carolina the chance, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but there is a way in which you can win the entire thing from here on out without having to have any other starting pitcher win a game. The math does line up to be able to do that.
That's a really good point, especially if you look at the supers as we're going to talk about this weekend, where you win the first 2 games and that's it. You're on to Omaha from there. Um, One of the things you brought up there, that first inning, you mentioned the air that what was that Saturday night, I guess, against Oklahoma in the first game. I was in the building, was able to get a ticket to that one, and just seeing how rattled Oklahoma was in that moment, because there had been so much talk, right, about Kyson Witherspoon and how Oklahoma was saving their star pitcher, whose twin brother starts the night before against Nebraska. They saved their ace for Carolina, and it was clear that Carolina, I don't know if they took that personally to go with the MJ line, but they were definitely locked in from the beginning. And Kyson gives up more runs than he's given up all season. So back to your point, the fact that the air, maybe that's different, but that first inning, the way that they took advantage of that opportunity, like you said, opportunistic, that changed the entire game from there. Um, I guess if we move over to Arizona, you've been diving into Arizona, getting into what this Wildcats team will bring to Chapel Hill, how they've gotten here to this point. What are the things that strike you about Arizona and the matchup specifically with Carolina?
Number one, Arizona is hot. They were a preseason top 25 team, and they played a season opening tournament at the Texas Rangers ballpark. A lot of teams will do that. Carolina's fortunate enough to have that ECU series. It's kind of its marquee early season event this year. Also, the Heels played Texas Tech in a traditional weekend series, but a lot of teams will go to these, baseball versions of the Maui Invitational, if you will, because you can play indoors, guaranteed to get games against good competition. Not to compare Arlington, Texas to Maui, but you get the point. So Arizona was in that event. I believe Ole Miss, Clemson, Louisville were the three teams they played, and they got crushed over the course of that opening weekend. And it was really humbling for that group. And then they got hot in the middle of March, went on a long win streak, beat West Virginia in a road series. West Virginia was kind of the class of the Big 12 most of the regular season. And then Arizona had an up and down kind of end of April, early May. They have a key outfielder, Brendan Summerhill, who's their leadoff guy. He's projected to be a first round pick. In fact, in MLB.com's latest prospect rankings, he's one spot ahead of Luke Stevenson. Summerhill's 19th and Stevenson is 20th in terms of draft prospects. And Summerhill, he broke his hand punching a water cooler, came back, homered in his first game back, and then injured his hamstring the next game. And that second absence of Summerhill, things got bumpy. But then middle of May, Summerhill comes back, and Arizona takes 2 of 3 on the road at Houston to end the regular season. They go back to Arlington, Texas, the Big 12 tournament, and roll through it. They completely shut down BYU in their quarterfinal. They roll that really good West Virginia club, who's in a super regional this weekend, a 12-1 final in the semis, and then they beat a solid TCU program 2-1 in 10 innings to win the Big 12 title. Then from there, it's off to Eugene, Oregon for the Eugene Regional. A potential old Pac-12 matchup with Oregon was going to be the headline, right? Arizona's the hot team. Oregon's had a great year, comparable to Carolina record-wise, and had been playing really well. And I'm sure you guys saw the incident Friday night. It was the Oregon-Utah Valley game. Arizona had already beaten Cal Poly in their first game. And then for those of you out there in the world that have not seen it, just Google Oregon controversial call. Oregon was down to Utah Valley. Player runs over the catcher at home plate. Some folks thought the catcher was blocking the plate. Basically, the NCAA released a statement that the catcher, even if they are blocking the plate, if the runner initiates malicious contact, then the runner's out. It turned into a whole hullabaloo, player ejected, blah, blah, blah. Oregon winds up losing that game and then loses to Cal Poly the next day. Boom, 2 and done, gone. And so Arizona wins the Eugene Regional in dominating fashion. They outscored opponents 31-6 over the course of the weekend, but the opponents were Cal Poly twice out of the Big West Conference. Solid team, Big West champions. Big West is a good baseball program, or good baseball conference, but it's not a power conference team. Utah Valley as well, conference champion. You know, they deserve to be there. They beat Oregon Friday night, but not a power conference team. So it's this 3-game sweep through the Big 12 tournament, this 3-game dominating sweep through the Eugene Regional, where Arizona hit a ton of home runs over the course of the weekend. I think they had 15 home runs as a team in the 3 games, but PK Park in Eugene, where Oregon plays, it's almost like a West Coast version of the Couch in Winston-Salem, if you're familiar with that. Short walls in the sense of not very high height-wise out there in the outfield, and also not very far from home plate, and the wind was blowing out. So
it's a launching pad, essentially.
It's a launch pad for sure, yeah. For sure. But 15 home runs is 15 home runs. You know, you don't hit 15 home runs if you don't have good hitters. So I guess all that to summarize, Arizona is hot right now, but have they seen an opponent the caliber of Carolina over that stretch for more than one game? I would put West Virginia in that group, but for more than one game is the question.
That's a good question. I think specifically, have they seen the level of starting pitching? Because you were talking about Jake Knapp before, just even historically this season, he's so consistent and it seems so easy for him and boring almost to a degree that it's easy to not think about the fact that something like this doesn't happen hardly ever. We're talking about a guy that he's not up to 13 wins. He's 1 win away from the single season record at Carolina. So I'm with you. I don't think that Arizona has not seen Jake Knapp or somebody like Takero in terms of the heater that he's on. So I guess I'm curious, as you're getting more into, you've definitely deep dived into Arizona. How do you think that Jake Knapp matches up with them in that first game? I don't think it's been publicly announced, but we've assumed that he's going to get the start Friday at 12. What do you think about that matchup between Knapp and the Wildcats?
I mean, anytime that you put Jake Knapp on the mound this year, you got to feel good about it, right? He is obviously a fastball first pitcher, pounds the zone. One of my broadcast partners on TV, Paul Shuey, likes to say that the sound that Knapp's fastball makes is different from your average college
Hmm.
pitcher. There's just a different noise to it when it slams into the glove. Knapp has gotten himself into minor trouble. Obviously, as we've said a couple of times through the show here, has not lost a game all year, but has gotten himself into some minor trouble, giving up homers. I think the NC State game that he wound up winning 8-1. Wolfpack scored on a home run there. He gave up a homer to Florida State. So I think 6 of the 25 runs he's given up this year have come via homer. And so if Arizona is, continuing to swing the bats well, that's how they beat him. A spot where, say, it's a situation like the Holy Cross game last week. Knapp has been very solid this year, but hasn't been perfect because pitching can't be perfect, right? You're going to have one inning or two where there's some traffic behind you. And that sixth inning against Holy Cross, where I think it was walk, single walk, and bases were loaded with one out, and Holy Cross flies out and grounds out and innings over. But if in that spot Arizona hits a ball that may clear the fence, that's where things get to a different story. But all that to say, I like any time that Jake Knapp's on the mound against an Arizona team that they've scored a bunch of runs with the homer, but can they string together enough runs to have a higher scoring total than what's been a really good Carolina offensive late? I don't know.
Hmm.
And something else that stands out to me there that you said about the walks with Knapp too, because he was on a stretch of I think it was something like maybe even 27 straight innings without a walk. He'd been just on fire in terms of his command. It seems like that's something to watch, not just with the matchup with Knapp, but really the pitching staff as a whole, and how um, I'm not going to go on a soapbox in terms of like my views on um, umpiring, and I'm ready for robo umpires. Let's just get kind of go to that level. We have the technology. That's a whole conversation for another day. But I do think how these games are umpired, and if the strike zone's really tight, that could also be an impact. So that's something that I'm watching for too. But you're right. I mean, the fact that there's going to be traffic at some point, and his toughness and ability to bear down this year and get out of those situations has been really impressive. And then if you don't get to him in that situation, like against Holy Cross, and this is really true against BC as well in the ACC tournament, then you're in trouble because then he's back to just being efficient and mowing down hitters one after another, and trusting his defense because he's not a huge strikeout guy most of the time, but he really just will just be methodical. And um, so anyway, yeah, I'm excited about that matchup. Are there other things about the weekend, kind of looking ahead to the rest of the series there that stand out to you or you have your eye on?
Couple different pitching notes for both teams. So Arizona has used a sophomore right-hander, Owen Kramkowski, as their Friday guy of late. Kramkowski is one of the best pitchers in the nation in terms of strikeout to walk ratio. In fact, I got it open here on the other screen. I'll get you the exact number. He is second in the Big 12, 18th nationally in strikeout to walk ratio. Also is top 20 nationally in strikeouts per 9 innings. So he's more of a strikeout guy and does not walk batters behind him. So Krimkowski, 6'3" sophomore right-hander, probably gets the ball game one for Arizona. Rest of the weekend, their Saturday roll has been a bit of a revolving door throughout the year. And I would guess that in a best 2 out of 3 series, they actually may invert a little bit and they may throw their game 3 starter in game 2. Yeah, because he's been very effective of late. And that's a freshman right-hander, 6'4", big, tall right-hander. Smith Bailey is his name, one of those guys with 2 last names. Smith Bailey, freshman right-hander, probably gets the ball for Arizona. He is top 10 in the Big 12 in ERA, sub 4 ERA on the year. And again, has been pitching it really well of late. So probably Bailey in game 2 for Arizona. Would be surprised if they throw somebody else and save Bailey for a game three. Obviously, that may change if somehow Kremkowski beats Knapp on Friday. As for Carolina, Scott Forbes has said throughout the year that he has, quote, three Friday guys in his weekend rotation, guys that could go anywhere in the country and be most places in the country and be a Friday starter. But the truth of the matter is that Carolina has not won a game started by Aiden Houck since April 12th against Wake Forest. And Houck has pitched pretty well in those stretches. You think Florida State game three, NC State game two, etc. The game at Pitt, the middle game of that series, Carolina lost it 4-2. But the question becomes, what do you do with Houck and Ryan Lynch? Like, if you need to throw Ryan Lynch in relief in games one or two, does that make him available or not for game three? And then are you going to have enough arms in that third game if you've used Lynch in a relief role? Or do you say, okay, Houck was pretty good out of the bullpen against Florida State in the ACC semifinals. Do you make the switch for this week? So that's something to watch for Carolina. Obviously, that could be a moot point if Knapp and DeCaro go out there and shove, and McDuffie and Lynch close each of those games down and you sweep the series. So definitely a lot to look forward to pitching wise, and some questions for both teams if the series goes deep to three games.
It's a really good insight there. And obviously, as you've kind of mentioned here, we have the pieces to make that run to Omaha. It's just always a matter of baseball's kind of a wonky game. A pitcher can have an off game. If they couldn't have off games, we'd be playing one game series instead of three game series. But that's just how baseball goes in the pros and in college. And kind of to that point, I just want to pick your brain on this because it's kind of a conversation that is out there a lot. We've seen Vandy lose as the overall number one. We've seen Murray State kind of come up and beat Ole Miss in a game and advance to Super Regionals very unexpectedly. Do you think that the College World Series is the toughest road to a championship in college sports? And if so, why? If not, what do you think challenges it?
I think really the only thing that could be remotely comparable, just in things that I've watched Carolina compete in through the years, is probably the golf championship, where,
Mhm.
brief overview of that, I think it's 3 days of stroke play where you got to finish top six, and then you move
Right.
on to 3 more days of stroke play, and then you got to finish top eight, and then you have an 8 team single elimination match play bracket. That thing is nuts.
Goodness. Yeah.
That's a really hard thing to win. But baseball, yeah, good gracious. I mean, you can take up to 4 losses in the NCAA tournament and still win the national championship. But on the flip side, you've got to win 10 games to win the title.
Right.
You've got to win three the first week, two the second week, three in that kind of first round of Omaha, if you will, and then two more to claim the national title. And winning 10 games while only being able to take on 4 losses timed up right along the way against really good competition, gosh, it's difficult. But as I alluded to earlier, your best case scenario for Carolina is you throw your two aces and you sweep this weekend. And then because of the timing of the College World Series, where it's the same format to start as a regional, but it's spread out over a longer time frame to begin, you could throw Knapp Friday, DeCaro Sunday, Knapp again Wednesday, and then bring each of them back one time each in the championship series, and boom, there you go. You've gotten the entire thing without having to have anyone other than the two of them win a game. That's so much easier said than done, though.
Matt, just zooming out a little bit on College World Series in general, who are some of your kind of must-watch teams? Who have you found exciting, or who is there to look out for should Carolina be fortunate enough to advance past the Super Regionals in Arizona?
Yeah, there's a couple different storylines to watch. I'll just kind of go through Carolina's side of the bracket in Omaha here. There's a super regional between Louisville and Miami. Miami knocked off Southern Miss, who was a host. Louisville knocked off Vanderbilt, who was a host. They didn't actually eliminate them. Wright State did, but Louisville did beat Vandy along the way. And so now there is a super regional between two teams that were the 9 and 10 seeds in the ACC tournament and were both done in Durham by 9 p.m. on Tuesday, very
We love
first day.
chaos. We love it.
Yes, we do. One of the two of them will go to Omaha, and both had very solid seasons at certain points. Both had times where they were among the hottest teams in the ACC. Louisville took 2 of 3 from Carolina, way back in mid-March. But either Louisville or Miami will go to Omaha. Another matchup is Auburn against Coastal Carolina. That's a fascinating super. Auburn is hosting a super for the first time ever. They have a really good Friday night pitcher, Sam Dutton. He's run into some trouble of late, but yet Auburn has still had success offensively. They have a catcher named Ike Irish, who is the only catcher ranked above Luke Stevenson, I think, in the latest ESPN MLB draft ranks I saw. Coastal Carolina, fascinating team. I like to tell people that don't follow baseball super well at the college level that really the only comparison for Coastal Carolina baseball across college athletics is Gonzaga men's basketball. They're not a power conference team by name, but yet they are just as good. And they are the number two team in the country in ERA. They
Oh, wow.
have a fantastic pitching staff this year. And that can play well in Charles Schwab Field in Omaha, where there's some big cavernous outfield gaps. So Coastal Carolina, if they can go to Auburn and win that super regional, now Coastal's won 21 games in a row at the time that we're talking here. So anything's possible there. And then the other super is the 8 and 9 national seeds. Oregon State is the 8 seed. Florida State is the 9. Needless to say, another Carolina Florida State matchup would be juicy. Carolina took 3 of the 4 in the regular season and in the ACC semifinals. Oregon State has a lot of history with the Diamond Heels in Omaha. Feels like they've played each
Yeah.
other nearly every time Carolina goes out
Yep.
there.
Yep.
Oregon State baseball chose to be an independent after the Pac-12's collapse, and so they put together a schedule this year where they were on the road a ton. I think they only had 20 home games all year, but they've got some good arms. They lost their first regional game and then battled back. But that's really hard to do if you lose that first game on Friday and then still win the regional.
Mm.
And Oregon State did that, and they just rolled people. The USC, I believe, TCU, all were rolled by Oregon State on the way back. And so
Really.
if Oregon State is able to get by FSU, that would be a tough matchup. So that side of the bracket, plenty of good storylines, but definitely like the Heels' chances. And then opposite side of the bracket, Arkansas is probably the best SEC team left. LSU in that department as well. And how about Duke? I mean, you say all Duke has to do is get by Murray State, and they're going to Omaha for the first time ever under Chris Pollard. So definitely plenty of storylines to watch this weekend.
Making me pick between FSU and Oregon State. Oof.
That's tough, right?
That goes way back to what, 2006, 2007, Oregon State. I
2006
still
and
remember it
'07.
20 years
Yeah.
later. Yeah.
Yeah. I was out there with my brother for both of those because we have family in Omaha. And Oregon State's thing has kind of been, for since then, really has been winning out of the losers bracket. I think they were in the losers bracket, may have lost the first game, maybe to Miami in the College World Series that year and win the whole thing. So that they're almost more dangerous for whatever reason if they lose that first game. Um,
Yeah, and Mitch Canham, who was a player on those
right.
teams, is now their head coach. So there's a common thread all the way through.
Yeah, their identity hasn't, that's a good point, hasn't really changed. I guess the other thing I was going to say about it is Carolina has history with Auburn, certainly in other sports, notably basketball, but baseball too. The 2019 Supers was when Auburn came to the Bosch and ends up going to Omaha. So really, there's a pathway for redemption for Carolina on that side of the bracket if it falls that way,
Yeah, and Coastal, Carolina plays Coastal pretty much every year.
right?
This year they played them early March. It was a back and forth 5-4 Carolina win in 11 innings. So they are certainly not a team to be taken lightly whatsoever. And then, Louisville and Miami. Like we said, both of them challenged the Tar Heels during the regular season, and they're playing hot right now. And that's just kind of the way baseball goes.
Totally. Matt, just picking your brain from a broadcaster side a little bit because I'm always curious about this. What does your game prep look like for this? When you have all these teams that you do your best to follow throughout the year, but all of them are new, you get the surprises like Murray State. As much of a stats guy as you are, I can't imagine you tracked Murray State baseball stats the entire year, right? What does
Definitely
game
not.
prep
No.
look like for College World Series and also compared to other sports? Because baseball is such a stats heavy sport, does it differ for you and what does that look like?
Absolutely. So for basketball, for example, I'll have a one sheet Excel document where it's a heavily formatted Excel document that allows me to put notes and stats for every player. I'll throw these on my social media every once in a while. And that's a process where I sit down and 2 hours later, I've got it for that basketball team because you've got maybe 12 players. you know the important numbers, and the game moves so fast that you can't fit in a ton of stories and numbers anyway. While with baseball, it feels like you could go on for hours digging things up. And so generally it's just try and figure out 1 to 2 headlines about each player.
Hmm.
So for example, when Mason White comes up for Arizona, it's like, okay, this guy is the Eugene Regional and Big 12 tournament most outstanding player, second team all Big 12. That's what you need to know about this guy. Um, and then get some general trends based off of info that I can see. I try to not dive into the advanced analytics too much for consumption by my audience. They
Yeah.
can help me, but when you have to spend more time explaining what a
Right.
number might mean, then perhaps it loses some effectiveness.
For sure.
But yeah, just trying as much as possible to understand the story of the opponent, how they got to this point. And in the case of a super regional, it's easier than a regional because it's just one opponent and
Hmm.
it's like a weekend series essentially. So now it's okay. I just haven't watched much Arizona all year. Who are the important people? And
Sure.
let's get ready for this weekend series
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that insight. I'm always just curious about that kind of prep and what goes into it because there is a lot that goes into it.
for sure.
So looking at, you also mentioned just the fact that you're involved in so many sports at UNC in terms of the broadcasting, but also the production side. Curious about, now that we're getting close here with baseball, I think is probably the last sport, right? As we're wrapping up the 24-25 athletics year for Carolina. Has there been a favorite moment or even moments that comes to mind when you've been on the call this year, that stands out to you?
I was fortunate enough to handle the TV play-by-play call of both the Elite Eight games for field hockey and women's soccer in the fall. Field hockey is playing Duke, who was the only team to score twice on Carolina in the regular season,
Wild
and
stat.
had a really, really good defense. And it was at Karen Shelton Stadium, chance to go to the Final Four. Carolina wins the game 3-0. Duke controlled a little bit early, but Carolina didn't let them capitalize on any of those opportunities. And beautiful day, great win, etc. Um, then women's soccer a couple weeks later against Penn State. Penn State scored first. They had a goal that was disallowed by an offside call after a lengthy review. I think there was another element to the offside. It was like a foul also involved with it. But it was a long review that disallowed the second goal that would have put Penn State up 2-0. So Carolina comes back, ties it, wins it, no T. There was a lot of controversy on was it a handball on Kate Fossey. But Carolina won that to go to the College Cup, and then obviously rolled Duke there and beat Wake in the national title game. So those were a couple of cool moments. Women's basketball being able to go out west and become the first ACC basketball team, men or women, to sweep the now dreaded California swing in conference play. That was pretty cool. Other women's basketball moment, beating Indiana by 30 to win the battle for Atlantis title. That was a special moment. So those are some that definitely stick out to me. And then from a baseball standpoint, something I talked about earlier in the interview, was fortunate enough to be on the TV call for the game 3 of the Duke series, the 14 inning win, where if that goes the other way, Carolina drops the series. I think at that point they would have been 2-3 in ACC series at that point in the year. Instead, the Heels win it and they haven't dropped an ACC series since. So a nutty back and forth game that ends on Alex Madera's bouncing ball up the middle. Tyson Bass scores and Carolina wins it, and I think the run is still ongoing as an domino effect of that.
Yeah, they really have not looked back. You're right, since that point.
Mm-hmm.
Jay, anything else you got from Matt?
I don't think so. I mean, I could have so many more questions because it feels like, the cool thing for me about, I love listening to sports on the radio, especially baseball. And um, you just, it's cool to talk to you in person because I think for so many Carolina baseball fans, especially, um, you're part of the soundtrack, right? You're a key part of the experience of the journey in the season. And so just to hear the stories, hear the insight, all of the just big moments along the way. And it's just been a lot of fun for me. So I could geek out way longer than we have. I know you have a hard out at 1:30, so we could keep going,
We
but
could do
A couple hours,
4 hours of
a few
podcasting.
more
Yeah.
coffees, we'll be good.
um, but no, I just really appreciate the time and insight. And I guess where can folks find you? I know you're pretty active on social media in terms of hearing from you, but also seeing your work.
Yeah, follow me on X or on Instagram. It's Matt Krause PXP. That's Krause and PXP for play by play. So I'm on both of those platforms there. Rest of the way, baseball wise, I'll be with Dave Nathan in the analyst chair on the Tar Heel Sports Network. So looking forward to hopefully several more baseball games and a fun trip to the Midwest.
Fantastic stuff. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time today. I mean, your passion is clear as you come across on the broadcast, and I know all fans definitely appreciate what you do, not just Jonathan and I, and bringing us into that environment. So best of luck this weekend to you and the Heels both.
Jonathan, Craig, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely. And if you need any trivia questions for Dave, because I know that's a thing you do from time to time, let us know. We'll try to stump him.
I like it. I like it.
You two together are dangerous, I tell you what. Take care.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Man, that was awesome. Such a joy to have Matt on the show. Really, again, appreciate his time and willingness. I know it's a busy time of year. We talked to him a little bit off the mic. It definitely seems like broadcasters, the only month they really get off, we were talking about, is July in a way. And then it's picking back up for all the fall sports again with football and soccer, and then you're back into the rotation. So, very appreciative to him. But as always, we want to kind of close the show out now with a quick point out, or maybe even a few of them today, because it's been a minute since we've been on the mic, and I just feel like that's kind of deserved. So again, big shout out to Matt and Jonathan. Let's go into some point outs.
But we're talking lacrosse this time around. National champions again at North Carolina, undefeated season. Really impressive stuff from the women's lacrosse team and Coach Levy. And they end up beating Northwestern in that national championship game and really just steamrolled their way to the national championship. So want to shout them out. Also want to shout out Chloe Humphrey. Actually, she's one of three sisters who's on the lacrosse team this year, but she won the National Player of the Year award for lacrosse. I believe the first
So
freshman
cool.
to ever do that. As a freshman, that is hard to believe, but just racked up goals along the way to that championship. So definitely, yeah, pretty amazing, and definitely thinking about them and all they accomplished. To have another national championship coming back to the University National Champions is pretty cool. Um, the Diamond Heels. I mean, I know their
Let's
journey
go.
isn't complete, but to win the ACC tournament championship the way that they did in dominant fashion, first tournament championship since ACC tournament championship since 22 when they beat NC State in Charlotte. But just adding to the trophy case in the spring. So,
Mhm.
and
And
again, as we
resilient too. They could have easily gone down to that hot Sooners team, and they stuck it out on Monday.
That's it. I mean, this team is tough. They're gritty. And that's one of the things that you like about how they set up for this possible run that they could go on here. And we're going to talk more about that hopefully in the coming weeks, um, into the middle of June as if they make it to Omaha. But then just want to point out to, and we talked about it a little bit, but the staff in terms of Jim Tanner, especially the GM, and then the whole Carolina basketball staff in terms of being able to land the first international pro to come to Carolina basketball.
Luca.
Uh, yeah,
See if that
that's
one sticks.
it's going to. I mean, right now, look, the Luke chant is a constant, whether it was Luke May and now Luke Stevenson at the
Yep.
Bosch. That the Bosch is going to be ringing out with Luke all weekend. Um, Luca, yeah, I like that a lot. But shout out to Luca. Pointing out to him because look, it's being the first of something like this to come to UNC when we haven't had other international pros in the past. So excited, just not about what he brings as a basketball player, but learning about his character and his coaches talking about his toughness and his desire to win. And what did you say when in his public statement he's a man of decisions? Was that right?
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Um, uh, we definitely need to put that on a shirt or something. I mean, that is phenomenal stuff. But this guy just seems like he has that edge and that not only that he's a Tar Heel, but he's a Hubert Davis guy, and that he is he is focused on winning, but he's also focused on the team and whatever it takes to win as many games as possible. Uh, so excited that he's a Tar Heel. So there's a lot to celebrate as the athletic calendar is still going. We're getting close to winding down here, and will in the middle of June, but a lot to celebrate as we talked about.
Yes, confirming man of decision. I just want to read this quote real
Yeah,
quick to
please,
close the
please.
show because it's great. His quote on coming to North Carolina said, "The fans of North Carolina can expect a temperamental and characterful player. I will try to give 100%. I have great energy and character. I know that the expectations are high and I will try to justify them. I like to be a man of decisions. I like to take the initiative. I will see that the team achieves as many victories as possible and goes to the very top." What's there not to like?
I don't know
That's
how we're
that's
still
great.
sitting here because we really should have run through a wall. I mean, this
Exactly.
guy,
Yeah, I read that and I was like, let's go. I'm
yeah.
on board. Yeah.
And we've had so many conversations about who is going to bring the leadership last year specifically, right?
Yep.
Especially we had it with Cormac and Harrison coming in. Maybe Luca's a guy,
Could be.
along with Trimble and others. But it seems like this team is really united in this sense of like we're not messing around. We have a very specific goal in mind, and we're not letting anything stop us in getting there. Um, yeah, but man of decision, a team of decision. We can work on this. We can workshop this as we get closer to the season.
Totally. Yeah. Love the pickup. Love the Jaden pickup from VT. Good stuff. Appreciate the analysis early on in the episode. And again, shout out to Matt Krause for coming on the show today as well. But until then, get out to the Bosch, get to your TV, get to your radio, listen in to the Heels, cheer them on to victory through Sunday. Hopefully this doesn't get pushed into Monday with some weird, wonky, bad weather coming in. Be nice to get the series out of the way, win 2 straight, and make sure that's that. So, Jonathan, anything else before we wrap up the show?
That's it, man. Heck of an episode, heck of a time of year, a lot happening, a lot to be excited about as a Tar Heel. And for me on my end, I'm just saying, go Heels.
Go Heels.